Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much. The first question, la primera pregunta. El Buda hablaba para gente que vivía en un espacio-tiempo totalmente distinto a nuestro mundo, que está muy sobreestimulado. ¿Es posible traer las verdades que señala el Dharma a una humanidad tan distorsionada, tan extendida, tan neurótica, cultivar la atención plena en medio de una adicción tecnológica cada vez mayor, en una época en la que todo parece que se degenera?
So it's quite true that rural India, with maybe a tiny fraction of its contemporary population, is very different than the modern world worldwide, with our cities, communication. This is very obvious. But the Buddha was addressing issues that were not only unique to his time, but also deeper issues that are important and true for human beings throughout history, wherever we are. The nature of suffering, the fundamental nature of suffering, of body, but especially mental suffering, of anxiety, of fear, of distress, and so forth, these are universal. The causes, the fundamental causes, are also universal. That is, many things from outside may trigger mental distress, unhappiness, and so forth, but the fundamental causes of misapprehending the nature of reality, clinging and craving for things that really don't give us any satisfaction, are not true sources of happiness, and then anger, hatred, aggression. The modern world doesn't have any monopoly on these. And so the Buddha was addressing these underlying issues above all, while also specifically engaging with people from his time, in his place. But as the suffering is fundamentally the same, the underlying causes are fundamentally the same, so is the path to finding mental balance, peace of mind, and really alleviating the inner afflictions of the mind. These are also timeless.
Pero la inteligencia atencional que necesitamos cultivar para poder progresar en una estabilización de la mente y la indagación, al estar tan disociada por la tecnología, ¿es posible realmente hacer una práctica tan sofisticada, con movimientos cognoscitivos tan interesantes como los que plantea el budismo, con esta dispersión de los móviles y de todas estas tecnologías?
I think the first point, even prior to your question, is, do people even want to change? If people have no interest of changing their priorities, their worldview, their day-to-day conduct, if they have no interest, then it doesn't matter what we might have to offer to them. It's like a baby that goes when the mother's trying to feed. If the baby doesn't want to eat, it's very hard to force feed. And nobody, at least certainly in Buddhism, wants to force feed spiritual teachings, meditation. It's not possible, and we have no wish to do so. Having said that, though, if people do feel a yearning for greater peace of mind, greater meaning in their lives, less anxiety, less depression, a greater sense of fulfillment, if the wish is there, then it would be like a person coming to a hospital who's very, very ill, with multiple illnesses, and imagine a doctor that said, "Oh, you're so ill, we can't treat you." That would be very uncompassionate. So there are many mental imbalances. Many of them are simply considered normal, and then some are, how do you say, medically diagnosed. And they are severe and they're very widespread. But the teachings from the Buddha Dharma are really designed to help everyone. Now, if people are really mentally disabled by some kind of clinically diagnosed mental disorder, then Buddhism is not specifically adapted or intended for such people. However, this doesn't mean that the meditations, the theory, and so forth from Buddhism are irrelevant or useless, but it does suggest that there could be great benefit in a close collaboration by clinical psychologists, by psychiatrists, other mental healthcare professionals, working with Buddhist meditation teachers or teachings on mindfulness and so forth, and then taking these classic teachings that are really quite universal and adapting them for people with specific types of mental problems. And that would go also adapting them for children, because we don't have any Buddhist teachings for children in the great texts, adapting them for people who are very elderly and they're facing unprecedented challenges due to old age. And so I think there's a great deal of potential here, but we should never give up saying, oh, the modern world is too dysfunctional, too degenerate. You do that only for a patient, only when the patient dies. And then you gently take them through the transition of death. But as long as there's any hope of even alleviating the suffering, let alone dispelling it, then that's our job, to offer our very best, no matter how dark the outlook seems to be.
El Buda repetía en sus enseñanzas la fórmula na me so ata. Eso no es mi sí mismo. Y como decía Samkara, siempre que nosotros negamos algo irreal, eso es con referencia a algo real. ¿Qué es ese algo real al que apuntan todas las tradiciones religiosas y sapienciales?
So the Buddhist teachings on not self can very easily be misunderstood because a translation of this anatta is also no self. That one could give one the false impression that I don't exist, you don't exist, in which case we're not having a conversation. Because conversation is between people, and you're a person, I'm a person, and this person is called Beatrice, and this person is called Alan, and if I refer to Alan in the first person, of course I say I. So never at any time did the Buddha say or imply that the I doesn't exist, that people don't exist. It's silly, but he was clearly stating that we may carry with us, in fact generally we do carry with us, a more substantial, separate and autonomous sense of I, that there's really something intrinsic, something enduring over time, a real ego or self that's in charge of the body and mind, and that this real ego really owns things. Not only this is my body, this is my mind, but then this is my spouse, my car, my possession, my reputation, my country, my culture. And so what he was pointing out here is not that these use of I and mine is simply invalid, because of these, of course, these are true. For the time being, this is my chair. But we know how light that is, that it's merely a convention. If you had asked me to sit in that chair, that would have been my chair. If you had asked me to sit on the floor, this floor would be mine. And so when we exaggerate the kind of the reality of I and mine, it's not only that it's incorrect, because this chair isn't really mine, this hand is just a hand, this body is just a body, it doesn't really belong to some ego, some self, and even the thoughts, images, memories don't belong to some autonomous self. That doesn't, of course, mean that I don't have a body, a mind, that I don't have a country. I have a passport, you know. And so nominally, as a convention, of course there are many things that are mine. But when we, again, exaggerate the reality, or concretize, substantialize this, then we open ourselves to a great deal of unnecessary suffering. And also division. And that is, I am here, you are there, that's perfectly fine. But if and true. But then if I grasp onto myself as being separate, autonomous, really over here, and you see what my fist does, it immediately goes to that. It's natural. You know this is an aspect of grasping, but you also know that's a weapon. And that I'm grasping to my side, and then I grasp to your side, you're over there, then we see there's a possibility of conflict. Because I've the sense of being absolutely separate. That's very harmful. The notion that anything is absolutely mine, it's not true, but it gives rise to so much conflict, so much misery. So, as Shankara Acharya so rightly said, if there is a delusion, then as in that I am autonomous, I'm independent, I'm enduring, that is a delusion. But does that obscure a deeper reality? Yes, it does. It does. And the deeper reality here, very simply, is as soon as I think of it, I feel kind of a lightness, as if I'm starting to float, you know, just metaphorically. And that is the lightness of being, that right now I'm an interviewee. That's who I am. And you are an interviewer, right? But as soon as this interview is over, then I cast off the identity of being an interviewee, because it's only because we agree. And so I set it aside like a cup of tea that I've sipped, and then set it down, and then I'm free. When I'm teaching Dharma, then I'm a teacher. But as soon as I stop teaching Dharma, then I release, I am a teacher, I am a teacher. So sometimes I'm arising as a grandfather, and sometimes as a spouse, and as a customer, and as a patient, if I go to see my doctor, and how many other ways. And so then we're kind of like a like refracted light. We manifest in so many ways, but each one light and always interrelational. Always interrelational. And then you say, but Alan, who are you in and of yourself? Who's the real Alan? And I say, nowhere to be found, which is wonderful. Because if there were an Alan that was to be found, an intrinsic, separate self, then this would alienate me from everything and everyone else. And so in seeing the emptiness of this substantial and autonomous self, we say, aha, but this means how do I exist? In utter interrelationship. Utter interrelationship. So now I'm rising relative to you and you're rising relative to me. Interrelationship. So you and I are now in a relationship. But this particular relationship ends at the end of this interview. You know, we can remain friends after that, but it's always interrelational. And so with the reality of our essential interrelatedness with all beings, then we see, as soon as I consider my well-being and my wish to be free of suffering, I see, well, now it makes no sense to strive for my well-being independent of everyone, because I don't even exist independent of everyone. So as an individual, I happen to be from America. America, so although we sometimes forget this, exists in a profound interrelationship with our immediate neighbors to the north and south, but all the rest of the world. And so it just makes sense. It's being realistic to attend to the well-being of all, because we're all interrelated. So seeing reality as it is naturally gives rise to compassion and harmony and concern, caring for others. That was my punctuation point. And grasping to myself then leaves my mind very small, isolated, alienated, anxious, unhappy, and ready for conflict. So, big advantage of seeing reality as it is, seeing the reality that is obscured by the delusion of thinking I am as something independent.
¿Cuál es la diferencia entre la conciencia sustrato, babanga, y la conciencia prístina, rigpa?
So the existence of something we call the substrate consciousness is not simply a philosophical speculation or a religious belief simply based on authority, which many religious beliefs are, but is a term for a dimension of consciousness, a subtle continuum of mental consciousness that contemplatives actually for hundreds of years in multiple traditions east and west have discovered, but of course speaking different languages, then they give different names to it. Of course, it has to be the case. So this term that I'm translating as substrate consciousness is alaya vijnana in Sanskrit. And so to understand this, we really need to address the issue, where does our human mind come from? The human body we know perfectly well, from the egg and the sperm, nourishment, and so very clear, complete biological explanation of how this body forms from the egg and sperm, develops into maturity, eventually dies. But where does the human mind come from? Human mental consciousness, where does that come from? Mental consciousness means that we're mentally aware of our thoughts, images, dreams. I'm mentally, not only visually, mentally aware of you, and so forth. So where does this come from? And for all of the very rich progress in many ways that the mind sciences have achieved over about the last 140 years since modern psychology first emerged, this remains a complete mystery. What are the necessary and sufficient causes for the emergence of a human mind, which is, of course, arising independence upon the brain, there's no question, and the very human parts of our mentality of thinking, reasoning, imagination, and so forth are arising independence upon the frontal cortex, which is very large and unique to human beings. So that's quite clear. But to say something arises independence upon doesn't necessarily tell you where it's emerging from, right? So this conversation right now is arising independence upon the invitation, the lights, the camera, cameraman, and so forth and so on. But they're not. But the conversation is not emerging from the lights, camera, and so forth. And so this question remains a scientific mystery. Whereas for contemplatives around the world, east and west, for maybe 3,000 or 4,000 years, have made a discovery here, and that is when the mind settles, You really calm the mind. This can be done only in meditation by and large. You really calm the mind, you draw it inwards. It's really as if your mind, which is a woman's mind, man's mind, Spanish, American, so forth, heavily configured, personal history, brain, environment, society, and so forth, that mind, as it were, melts. When you go very deeply within, you go very, very quiet. And what's been discovered here is that our ordinary mind, which we can call the psyche, which does definitely arise in dependence upon the brain, it melts into a more primal flow of consciousness that is not the subconscious of Jung or the collective unconscious of, it's not the subconscious of Freud or the collective unconscious of Jung. It's something you don't discover unless you really practice very deep meditation. The term would be samadhi, very deep concentration, directed within. And what contemplatives claim? So this is an observation that of course could be false or true. So nobody's expecting anyone to believe it just by saying it. One have to be very naive to believe anything you hear. But the assertion is this. This is a primal flow of consciousness, this substrate consciousness. It can be likened to a stem cell, which is not yet configured as a bone marrow cell or a blood cell or a brain cell, but when it comes into the right environment, then the stem cell turns into differentiated cells. Likewise, this substrate consciousness itself is not yet differentiated as human. But as it develops, as it differentiates in the formation of the fetus, then it takes on, in dependence upon the growing nervous system, and especially the brain, then it becomes differentiated, rather like white light being refracted through a prism. And then you see, oh, this is independent upon the prism. But the prism is not the source of the light, right? So it's widely assumed, but with no compelling evidence, that the mind emerges from the brain. Consciousness emerges from the brain. There's actually no evidence to that. The evidence is that brain activity and subjective experience are strongly correlated. That doesn't logically imply one emerges from the other. Is there influence by the brain on the mind? Of course. But does the mind influence the brain? Definitely. There's lots of evidence for that. Placebo effect and so on. So to try to bring this to a point then, here's an astonishing hypothesis for which there's empirical evidence that can be tested, and it can be tested in full collaboration with open-minded scientists, and that is this primal flow, this stem consciousness, which is only mental, it's not sensory, that this precedes, the continuum of this precedes the formation of a human fetus. It gets differentiated in the formation of the fetus. We go through our lives and the dying process, and the brain, when the brain shuts down, the body dies, then it melts back into nothing. It doesn't just vanish, but it melts back into this substrate consciousness. Now there's evidence for that. There's evidence that children sometimes, and some children, and then advanced yogis, highly accomplished contemplatives, can actually tap into that and retrieve memories from past life. So if this sounds very weird and bizarre, that's okay. So does the curvature of space-time. So does quantum mechanics. So do many aspects of modern physics, like lasers, would look like magic 100 years ago. So the fact that something's weird doesn't mean it's not true. But then we must be very critical and say, what's the evidence? What's the evidence? Then we can say, but what do most people believe? Neuroscientists and so forth, and they say, oh, but the mind is simply a function of the brain. It emerges from the brain. Some say it's the same as the brain. Some say it's a function of the brain. Some say it's emergent property of the brain. What all of these materialistic interpretations have in common is not one is testable. Not one has been tested, not one has been proved. And so if you have a hypothesis that can't even be tested scientifically, it certainly is not a scientific truth, but it's not even a scientific theory or scientific hypothesis, because they can be tested. So I look at this as a contemplative and I say, here the scientists sound like more like religious believers, and the contemplatives sound more like scientists, because our observations, our conclusions are based on evidence that can be tested, and they can be tested in the modern world. So that's an individual continuum. Every person's continuum is unique, but then if we go deeper, and this is again done experientially in meditation, you come to this substrate consciousness, and then release all identification with, the grasping, this is mine, even on a primal level. Release that. Release this reification, grasping onto it as being autonomous, real, and so forth. And the aspiration here is to cut through, to shatter that congealed, that tightly bound individual continuum, and to cut through, literally, to cut through to a deeper dimension of consciousness that is non-local, atemporal, and beyond all conceptual differentiations between like one and many, arising and passing, coming and going, truly trans-conceptual, but not unknowable. And this dimension, again, we find a lot of reports of this from multiple contemplative traditions. And of course they call it by different names. But a dimension of consciousness that is everywhere present, that is by nature luminous, beyond change, and it truly is divine. It's divine, it's transcendent, it's sacred, it's the fountain or the wellspring of genuine happiness, the fountain or wellspring of wisdom, compassion, and all virtues. And knowing that dimension of consciousness, one can say, is the ultimate meaning of existence in this universe.
¿Y qué necesidad tiene esa dimensión trascendental, no dual, de manifestar el mundo, de manifestar las formas? ¿Por qué no se queda en la no dualidad tranquilo y no se genera todo este sufrimiento cuando aparecemos en la existencia?
This dimension of awareness, it goes by different names. Even in Buddhism it goes by different names. Pristine awareness, primordial consciousness, indwelling mind of clear light. That's just a few, there are more. And other traditions also. Many, many references to a divine dimension of consciousness that is transpersonal, transconceptual, but can be known, And so if, now speak with them from the Buddhist perspective, is this divine consciousness, which is not someone else's, it's not someone else's, it is the deepest dimension of your own awareness. Did this create all the mess we're in? And the answer is no, all the mess we're in is that which obscures this deepest reality. The deepest reality is, again, it's primordially pure. The wellspring of wisdom, compassion, and all virtues. And a symptom or a quality of resting in that is immutable bliss. The bliss that utterly satisfies our deepest yearning. And so, if one asks, well, then why aren't we in that all the time? Why aren't we just dwelling in bliss all the time? And then the answer comes, because we are obscuring it with our own ignorance and misapprehension of reality. And that is, as long as I'm grasping to this body, really mine, this mind, mine, I am, and then grasping to everything else also as being really there in and of itself, and then getting caught in all the drama. Oh, I want this, I don't want this, I hope this, I fear that. Look out, exactly like in a non-lucid dream. A dream when you don't know you're dreaming. Then we get caught up in the story. And that takes up all our time, all our effort. It's very exhausting. It can be very depressing. It never ever satisfies. And so this is like ordinary human life. It's like a non-lucid dream. And as long as we're focusing on, oh, how can I get more money, more wealth, how can I get a better reputation, more influence, I want this, I want that, then this is all an enormous distraction. And it is exactly that covers over the true source of happiness, the true source of wisdom and compassion and fulfillment, is because we're attending to other things. And that's what obscures. So it's not our pristine awareness that obscures itself, it's our own activities up here where we live. That this is like a geyser, like a fountain that always wishes to come up, manifesting in this world, fill us with bliss and compassion and wisdom. And we keep on saying to reality, I'm sorry, but I'm busy. And that's what obscures. We're too busy with unimportant things. In the meantime, life passes. And to use this frontal cortex, to use this human intelligence, I think we have the opportunity to really understand what it means to die. It doesn't have to be an intrinsic mystery. And it is a mystery to modern science. Many people think, oh yeah, the scientific view is when you die, your consciousness just becomes nothing. That's merely a belief. It's nothing more than a belief. And the reason for that is scientists clearly do not know the necessary and sufficient causes for the emergence of human consciousness. Honest ones all agree on that. It's a mystery. If you don't know the cause of something, you don't know what's necessary to terminate it. If you don't know one, you don't know the other. So saying things like it's extremely probable or extremely likely or I'm very confident, that's fine. But it's like having a closet over there that I've never been in and saying, I'm sure there are clothes in that closet. I'm sure it's very likely there are shoes in that closet. In fact, I'm really positive. And then you open it up and find that it's actually filled with other things. So it doesn't matter what you believe. Something is true. But if death is something we've experienced in the past, then drawing on memories from past death and how we came into this life could shed a very clear light on where we're going from here. These are testable hypotheses. The notion that consciousness emerges from the brain, untestable hypothesis. The notion that consciousness terminates at death, untestable hypothesis. So those are mere beliefs, where the contemplatives actually have strategies for finding out what is the actual nature, where did we come from, where are we going, and what is the potential of human consciousness. Here is again, it's not that contemplatives simply are better than or know more than scientists, because scientists know so much more about so many aspects of the physical world, but contemplatives know a lot about the nature of consciousness. So it's a time not to say who's better or to have an arm wrestle, you know, it's to collaborate, to collaborate. That is the theme for the modern world, of stop this nonsense that our culture knows more than yours. We are better than you. We have nothing to learn from you. That's true among religions, to stop just insisting we're better than you, we have the only way. But what can we learn from the others? Between science and spirituality, from one religion to another, while holding to one's own views, that's fine. But knowing also there is no one system that is complete. Not Buddhism, not Christianity, not science, none are complete. So when we recognize in joyful humility that our own views are incomplete and may be flawed, then that invites conversation and collaboration. And that's the hope for the world.
Ojalá. Vamos a hablar de la muerte. Para todas las tradiciones, morir es el último acto esencial. El cierre de una vida del que depende nuestra existencia póstuma, si damos por hecho en esta creencia. El budismo tibetano relaciona las fases del sueño con las fases de la muerte. ¿Puede darnos alguna indicación de cómo aprender a conocer los elementos de ese proceso de disolución que es el dormir, que es parecido al de la muerte real?
There's a principle of conservation, multiple principles of conservation that run through all of the natural sciences, but especially the one I've studied at some length, physics. And that is, for example, any configuration of matter and energy, it never arises from nothing. It always arises from some previous configuration. Something is conserved and then it transforms from a gas to a liquid, to this form, to that form. So just as you never get something from nothing, so do you never ever have a configuration of matter and energy that turns into nothing. Never happens. Space-time also. Space-time transforms into other configurations of space-time. It doesn't turn into nothing. It doesn't emerge out of nothing. This is just the nature of nature. And we would say in colloquial, every ending implies a beginning. That's it. So the notion that a human life simply ends, and that's an ultimate ending because consciousness became nothing, is actually a view that's contrary to everything we know about the natural world, where there's conservation. And we just haven't gotten to the point yet, but maybe within your generation, if not mine, that we recognized, you know, we've been quite silly to think that somehow consciousness is not part of the natural universe. You can read whole books on cosmology, which I have, with no references to consciousness at all. And you say, but there would be no cosmology without consciousness. How can you leave it out? Do you think you're God? Do you think that human beings are outside of nature? This is absurd. We're in nature, and that means every aspect of it is part of nature. Our consciousness, our emotions, memories, part of nature. And so there are conservation principles at work when it comes to consciousness as well. It doesn't arise from nothing, and it doesn't arise from matter any more than space-time emerges from matter, or matter emerges from space-time. It's okay. This is not just dualistic, it's pluralistic. Having said that then, as I've mentioned before, the notion that human consciousness just turns into nothing at death, I know that many people probably find that comforting, like just thinking it's going to be the deep sleep, or on tombs, I don't know if you have in Spain, rest in peace. Who's there resting in peace? This is a complete superstition. See if somebody's sleeping down there. A complete superstition. That the notion that we just go to sleep is based on nothing. The notion that we become nothing is based on nothing. And so to face at least the very real possibility, something is true. But modern scientists doesn't know about it because they're looking outside rather than looking inside. If you look at the brain and behavior, of course you won't know if anything continues because you're looking at something that just, there it is. It's physical. So, it is true that to a certain degree there are interesting parallels between the process of falling asleep into deep dreamless sleep and the process of dying. And so, very simply put, if you just have a nice, gentle falling to sleep, then as you're just very sleepy and you're starting to fall into sleep, then your senses, your eyes are closed, but even if they're open, you wouldn't see. Your ears are open, you don't hear. As you fall into deeper sleep, you become less and less aware of your own body, let alone of any smells or tastes. So all of these 5 sensory modes of consciousness are withdrawing. Buddhist view, they're withdrawing into mental consciousness. And then in the meantime, as you're falling asleep, then your memories, thinking, imagination, desires, they're also shutting down, shutting down, shutting down, until you come to deep, dreamless sleep. At which point, then all of these activities of the human mind and activities of the 5 human senses have all gone dormant, and you're resting in the substrate consciousness. Now this is, of course, occurring as a continuum while the brain is still active. Of course, the brain doesn't stop. But this consciousness, when you're resting in it, transcends your psyche. It's not male or female, Spanish or German. It's not differentiated. So the kinetic energy, the activity of the mind has dissolved into the sheer potential of the substrate consciousness, right? Now, if you're resting there, then after about 90 minutes after you fall asleep, because there's a lot of research on dreaming, then you're likely to come into your first dream cycle. From that substrate consciousness, that will be activated, it will be catalyzed, and out of the substrate consciousness will emerge a dreamscape, a place that you're dreaming, and other people in the dream. And yourself is this little miniature, very, very young, only born 1 minute ago, version of yourself, or you could dream it that you're somebody else. And so now you're suddenly born into another world. And then you think this is reality, and you think you have a long past, but of course you were born 1 minute ago, and you think, oh, maybe I should buy some life insurance, and what should I do with my savings? I want to have a good 5-year portfolio, in your dream, and the dream's going to be over in 10 minutes. So they are kind of funny, But when we're not lucid, we get totally caught up in that drama. And then one thing or another happens, and the dream comes to an end, and we slip back into the substrate consciousness. 45 minutes later or so, we come into another cycle. And then, so in and out, like a dolphin that jumps above the water and then comes back down and so forth. So that, in a way then, each night we are reborn 5 to 7 times. From the time that we fall asleep, 5 to 7 dream cycles. And oddly enough, generally speaking, when we're in the first dream, we can't remember the waking state, what happened that day. In the second dream, we often can't remember the first dream, and so forth. And then when we wake up, many people can't remember any of the dreams. So what characterizes this rebirthing within a single night is amnesia, which is really too bad. Because if we didn't have amnesia, we could learn from all our mistakes in the previous dreams, but that doesn't tend to be the case. So that's a little miniature. Now, if one could fall asleep lucidly, and this is possible, you go from the waking state, and while your mind is falling asleep and your body is falling asleep, your breathing is slipping into the respiratory cycle of deep sleep. If you can maintain the flow of awareness, discerning, intelligent awareness, then you may actually pass through the whole sleeping process, or falling asleep process, lucidly. That is, maintaining awareness all the way down to the substrate consciousness and be in deep dreamless sleep and aware that you're in deep dreamless sleep. That's possible. Been done by many people. If you remain there lucid, then when the first dream comes up, then you can enter into the dream lucidly and know that it's a dream from the beginning, which then opens up a whole realm of possibilities of exploration. Because now you're saying, wow, this is a dream. What are the possibilities here? What might I do in this dream now that I know that it's a dream? And your degrees of freedom are enormous. because there are no external constraints. This is your dream, it's your creation. So now you're like an artist who has a big piece of clay. What would you like to shape? Would you like to shape a gorilla or a ballerina? Or what it's your clay, you know, like any artist with, you know, with a painting. It's your canvas. And so then you can really form whatever you like in the most meaningful way. And then it's over and you go back down. So that's it. So great advantage of being lucid, because if you're not lucid, you're pretty much just responding to everything in a delusional way, thinking those are real people there. And instead of making very intelligent choices, you're probably responding out of habit. So this is the process of falling asleep and the possibility of being lucid in the dream and even lucid in dreamless sleep. So tremendous potential here for research. Then we have the dying process. And the dying process is quite similar. If one is fortunate enough to have the opportunity, the good fortune to die gradually, with a clear mind, without much pain or no pain, then, and one is trained well, the mind before then one may pass through the whole dying process lucidly, and you observe the same process taking place. Your physical senses shutting down, the activities of the human mind arising independence upon the human brain, shutting down, all dissolving into the substrate consciousness, not vanishing into nothing. That goes against the principles of conservation of nature. Dissolves into an underlying substrate, and you may remain in that for maybe only a few minutes, just resting in that substrate, or substrate consciousness, but it can last as long as 3 days. Contemplatives have reported, where you're just resting there in basically what is like deep dreamless sleep. But if you're lucid, then you're just resting there. So rest in peace for 3 days maximum. And then something spontaneously happens, and that is, it's like this crystallized, individuated consciousness melts, and it melts into what is called the clear light of death. And this is where this pristine awareness, primordial consciousness, naturally manifests. If you've never recognized it before, then it will just pass right by and you'll hardly even notice it. You'll be moving right on. If you have been really a very trained contemplative, and you recognize this prior to dying, then you may be able to recognize this, and then you may be able to dwell for days or even weeks in what is really a divine consciousness. And that is tremendously purifying, tremendously rewarding. It is a non-dual realization of this ultimate dimension of consciousness. But then sooner or later, you release that, and then you go into this transitional process called in Tibetan bardo. And so this now is very much like a dream. And that is, you seem to have a body, you're going from here to there. As in a dream, you can instantly move from here to there. You can be having a conversation in Barcelona, and then suddenly you're talking with somebody else in Madrid. And then you're on a cruise in the Caribbean, as fast as the speed of thought. So we can change venue in a dream, and you can also change venue in the bardo. Now, if one is not lucid, if one went through the dying process not lucidly, then you just pass out. When you come to the substrate conscious, you just go unconscious, but you can't stay there. There are movements that will continue on. You'll pass right through the clear light of death, you won't recognize it, and then you suddenly find yourself in this bardo, where in the beginning of the bardo, you will appear to yourself as having a body, like you do in a dream. But what is unlike the dream is during the first phase, the first week or so of the bardo, you're basically a ghost. And you can actually see people you know. You can see what they're doing now, not imagination. You have a kind of clairvoyance. It's a ghost. And you can observe them, but as in the movie The Sixth Sense, rather famous movie in America with Bruce Willis, you can see them, of course they can't see you. And so it takes some people a little bit of time to recognize they're dead. Why is everybody ignoring me? Why is it ignoring me? But then you slip on, and as you go into the bardo, then you more and more forget who you were. The imprints are stored in the substrate consciousness. So you carry with you the memories for a while, and other habituations, propensities, this carries on. But for the time being, you lose your memories of the past life, just like you lose your memories when you go into a dream from the waking state. Now, the great advantage of being lucid through this whole process and entering the bardo, like entering the dream lucidly, entering the bardo lucidly, is if you recognize the bardo as a bardo, then you have enormous degrees of freedom. And you can use your wisdom, your compassion. There's no way I can become nothing, but I don't want to become nothing. Where shall I manifest? How can I be of greatest benefit? How can I best continue on my own spiritual journey? I'd like to follow my own journey, proceed toward complete awakening. I'd also like to be of benefit. And so then you see your options, like in a lucid dream, and you choose. And you can come in lucidly. So there's a great advantage there. And then sooner or later, then the bardo comes to an end, and you take your next form, your next incarnation, so to speak, by the power of your aspirations, wise aspirations. Now, it's not a catastrophe if one is not lucid, any more than dreams are all a catastrophe. But if you're not lucid, then what moves you through the bardo and moves you into your next life are your propensities, your aspirations, and so forth of the preceding life. And so if you've lived a virtuous life, compassionate, kindly, with or without religion, because some people call themselves religious and they do very awful things, and some other people have no religious beliefs, but they're ethical, they're virtuous, they're kind, really try to be of service. So that's what's really important. And so if one has lived a virtuous life, even if you go through the dying process non-lucidly, and you're in the bardo non-lucidly, this virtue, that will carry you through to another human rebirth most likely, and then hopefully you'll wake up sooner or later.
¿Cuáles serían las consecuencias de que el conocimiento de estas ciencias contemplativas tuvieran un calado en nuestra cultura tan perdida, tan sufriente? O sea, ¿habría una transformación posible porque estas teorías pudieran ser validadas por el único lenguaje en el que parece que se mueve Occidente ahora, que es el lenguaje científico, que aunque es una ciencia menor respecto a la mayor, que sería la contemplativa, quizás podría ayudar a traducir estas verdades y que la gente tomara responsabilidad sobre sus vidas, sabiendo lo que está en juego?
It's evident to people who are well-informed, open-minded and intelligent, that the way humanity, 7.5 billion people, the way we're treating our planet right now is unsustainable. And unsustainable in catastrophic ways. As our population continues to grow, quite soon, the Earth will not have enough resources to keep us all fed. We're emptying the ocean of fish, we are draining the natural resources, we are polluting the skies. Of course we are creating the global climate change. And so it's very strange that the scientific community has done their work. They've been wonderfully responsible and intelligent and provided us with all the information we need on how we as a human species are violating our own planet, which is not just ours, but we are wiping out other species very rapidly, diminishing the wildlife on the planet. Half of it has gone down in the last 40 years. So for the rest of the species on the planet, the human species is a nightmare. It's like a flesh-eating virus or bacteria. And so we're doing this, but the scientific community, I say this with tremendous respect, they've diagnosed this decades ago. And they've told us what needs to be done. Overpopulation, the depletion of natural resources, global climate change, and so forth. They've identified the problems, they've told us what we need to do, and we're not doing it. Governments are not doing it, democracies are not doing it, dictatorships are not doing it, corporations are not doing it. And so how is this possible? Because of ignorance and delusion. It's deliberate ignorance. We choose to ignore, and then we choose to pretend as if the economies of the world, if we continue to increase our gross domestic product, this is a good thing. If humanity continues to consume more, keep the consumer index up, continue to produce more and consume more and have lots and lots of kids, this is going to turn out really well. This is psychotic. And the scientists have told us that this is not a religious belief, this is crazy. But why do intelligent human beings embrace deliberate ignorance and bury our heads in delusion? And it's because we are confused and we're not seeing clearly. And although we know a lot about the external world, we're not acting on the insights. So how can this be the case? And I think the Buddhist tradition has a clear diagnosis. Why are we, ravaging our own environment, sabotaging our own children, grandchildren, and future generations of our own species? How is this possible? Are we savages? Are we cruel? Are we crazy? And the answer is none of the above. We're ignorant. And we're delusional, but we're also delusional about fundamentally, perhaps the most important thing, what really gives us happiness. And we are delusional here. We as modern society are fixated, as if deers staring into the headlights of a car, fixated on the external. More wealth, more power, more influence, more I, me, mine, as if things in the outside world will ever provide satisfaction. And yet we human beings want more. We want more, and that's good, but we're looking in the wrong direction. So what could we know that we don't know now? That humanity doesn't know now. And not because it's some fresh message from Buddhism. We've known, but we've forgotten that we knew, like a dream from one dream to the next. We forgot the wisdom we had 2,000 years ago. Going back to Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and St. Augustine and Shankara Acharya and Buddha and Zhuangzi and the great sages of the world throughout history, East and West, have said you will never find satisfaction by looking outwards with greater wealth, prestige, power. You'll never find satisfaction. And if you're looking always outwards for more, it will be catastrophic. That's what we're doing right now. Science has provided us with an enormous amount of knowledge of the external world, and we're not acting on that knowledge because we don't have enough knowledge of the human mind. What are the true sources of suffering? Which I think the Buddha diagnosed very clearly, compellingly, empirically. And what are the true sources of happiness? And they lie within. They lie within by leading a life that is nonviolent, that is benevolent. That gives rise to a sense of well-being. Cultivating mental balance in various ways, cultivating the heart, cultivating the mind. That helps. So you can find contentment with less and less consumption, less and less depletion. But find greater and greater contentment, greater and greater joy. That yearning for more can be satisfied, but never that way. And that's what science has not taught us, because they're looking outwards. They've done their job. But what the job that has not been done is looking inwards to find answers to the deepest question. Where did we come from? Where are we going? What's the nature of genuine happiness? What are the sources? And how shall we live in ways that are sustainable? We can live in harmony. So insight here, if this were taught, and again, this transcends any one religion. If there are truths in Buddhism, such that greed and delusion and hostility are roots of suffering, this is the Buddhist diagnosis. If that's true, it's just true. It's not a Buddhist belief any more than the laws of gravity that Newton discovered are English. So what he was English, so what he was Christian. They're not Christian laws, they're not English laws, they're just true. And so I'm sure there are many truths in Buddhism that are just true, and they can be put to the test. So if we find out what is true, drawing on the contemplative traditions of the world in collaboration, in dialogue with modern science, and then teach this to children around the world, then I think that we could save ourselves, we could save the planet, we could find harmony, and we could find the fulfillment we've always been seeking. And we need to do it urgently, because the course we're on right now, which is consumed with materialism and hedonism and consumerism, never gives satisfaction. It gives rise inevitably to conflict, and it always ends in tragedy. So right now we're writing a tragedy for ourselves. The story of humanity is now being written as a tragedy. We need to wake up to that and see how to turn it around so that it has an ongoing story that brings greater and greater happiness and not catastrophe for everyone.